different regression that roots the implicit pleasures and susceptibilities of judgment and the effects of contagion to which they point, one might revert to Luther. So tonight I'll be Lutheran, remembering that the frontier of Lutheranism marks a crucial break in the very concept of the political, if the political is a concept. Lacoulabart has argued that the modern political, in the very difficulty it encounters in instituting itself, does not begin with the French Revolution, but as Heine and Marx suspected, with the Reformation, the radicalization of Christianity, and the Renaissance, the imitation of the ancients. Modern political identification germinates in the severe agonistic playoffs that Luther instituted, and of which only one or two facets can be quickly indicated here. When weighing in on the issues of practical justice, Luther put tight restrictions on acts of judgment. I think you know how repressive and mean-spirited some of Luther's stuff is. Luther's maneuvers arose from the fear of a nearly libidinal problem, that of allowing for the abandon of judgment. So note how Luther targets judgment as a real problem because it turns everyone on. On the subject of turning on, is it too hot in here? Can we bring air to the people? I was going to say, is it me or is it the... Thank you. And you shouldn't be just docile bodies. You can press the pause button. You can say, I need, as Nietzsche would have said, in this neighborhood, more air, clean air. Okay, thank you, everyone. I appreciate it. So in 10 minutes, it'll... That's the way I like it. Thank you, girls. So now we're going to get heated up with Luther, okay, internally. And when it gets too cold, we'll as often as you want. Yeah. Thank you. No, really. So Luther's maneuvers, as I was just saying, show that he was fearful that there's a libidinal charge to acts of judgment and for the abandon of judgment, the possibility of a kind of orgy of judgment with everyone judging everyone, in which case all hell would break loose. Judgment cut into the field of authority in specific ways, at odds with worldly authority, and yet a mark of inwardly bound authority, directing the split between two roots of authority. So note that Luther and the Bavarians too nowadays starts out with anti-authoritarian tendencies. He was very anti-authoritarian in the beginning, only to come down hard with another brand of authority. Judgment encourages the freeing up of political energies by issuing permits for uprising, as well as spiritual Spaltung, a split in the newly minted self. When Christianity anointed faith, which for Luther henceforth trumps belief, so when Christianity moved and swerved toward faith over belief, it was compatible with and depended on an inner domain of authoritative decision. From now on, and this is without precedent perhaps, one could decide and judge for oneself. Now for us this is a cliche, but this is revolutionary, that you could decide and judge for yourself without and even against cognitive or empirical guarantees. In faith, in other words, you don't need to see God right here. But so you could judge for yourself and you don't need these guarantees. One could judge for oneself despite external signs or pressures that appear to provide irrefutable roadmaps and directives. So from now on, if there's proof that you're mistaken, doesn't matter. You can judge for yourself. Kant will later see the reliance on external authority as a sign of immaturity. Yet, if one can judge for oneself, one can shake off worldly restraints, start formulating strategies of resistance. Here's the problem for Luther. He opened this up. And Calvin develops the doctrine of the right to resist. So conscientious objectors and so on are backed up by the Calvinist engine. And set on the path to assuming one's mastery as subject, one could go so far as to become this conscientious objector, take on other troubleshooting assignments, released to the custody of the new authority of self. Conscience was enthroned by Luther, who thus invented an unprecedented inwardness and set up the fledgling authority of faith, priming the absolute inwardness of the subject, subventioned by the transcendent nature of Christian freedom vis-a-vis worldly authority. Luther initially brandished the necessity of an anti-authoritarian attitude, or Einstellung. So this is going to bring him trouble when he opens and starts singing a freedom kind of chant. The price for opening this new account of inner self was high. The Christian configuration linking justice, equality, and love would have to be supplanted with a firm sense of authority. From now on, the proximity of justice and judgment is in any case broken, and judgment finds itself severely restricted to sovereign enjoyment. From now on, Luther says, well, not everyone can judge anymore. The sovereign can, and it's a jouissance, it's the sovereign enjoyment anticipating a Hegelian Lacanian understanding of power and domination. The whole system of worldly order would fall apart, Luther threatened, without according unconditional recognition to the ruling authorities, without suppressing a situation where everyone would become a judge against the other, and where consequently no power or authority, no law or order would remain in the world. There would be nothing but murder and bloodshed. For it is, so what I'm also showing here is that one of Hannah Arendt's secret sources is also Luther, because she kind of replicates a lot of this with different edges. Nonetheless, she's fearful of some of these problems as well. So according to Luther, there'd be nothing but murder and bloodshed if authority were dispensed with. For it is not everyone who is competent to punish wickedness, but only the worldly authority which wields the sword. Luther had to put a lid on the political id that he had released. The repressive measures he introduced involved raising the authority of judgment and limiting the rights of its exercise. Judgment implicated in and tied to punishment is reserved, because with judgment comes the joy of punishing. So that from now on is reserved for the sovereign will, and one, meaning you peasants, cannot perform acts of judgment, nor should you count on metaphysical retractions to soften its blow. Mercy, says Luther, is neither here nor there, so don't ask for mercy either. Luther admonishes this in another address to the rebellious peasants. Luther's diction, firm without affirmation, often positions punishment as the place of need and its fulfillment. So Luther is very, very focused on punishment in a way that Freud says we should consider. Freud points out that Dostoevsky really got very excited when he was punished. So one shouldn't think that anyone who gives oneself up to the authorities or says, I did it, put me in prison, punish me, one shouldn't think they're really guilty. There may be this pleasure that still needs to be considered, and that's what Luther focuses in on, the joy